Hey everyone, I'm Willie at Shaw Spotlight. I'm really excited to sit down and talk with Scott Meller. Scott is a musician, an appreciator of music, and also an appreciator of musical instruments. He's the music guy all around. I've really come to appreciate his knowledge and insight moving to Fort McMurray.
A lot of people know me as my role at Campbell's Music, because I did work there. I have worked there for 25 years, but I actually moved to Fort McMurray in 1995 to come to school. I went to Keano College when they had a music program, and I took the music program there, and I also did the musical instrument repair program that was offered there. And through that all, I mean, I've grown both as a musician and as an appreciator of music. I mean, I try and get involved with a lot of the community music. So I've sung in the community choir, I've played in the community band, I played in the community jazz band. I've played with different bands on and off over the course of 25 years of living here. And I love music in general. My own musical journey started when I was very young. My family likes to play music. Still to this day, when we get together, that's one of the things that we do a lot of. And my growth as a musician and as a musical appreciator was pretty circuitous. I've gone through a lot of different styles and kinds of music, so you might find this to be a bit of a ramble because when I was growing up, I like to make the old joke that we listened to two kinds of music in my parents' house, country and Western. And so by the time I got to my teen years, I had two older brothers who firmly rebelled against country and Western and were listening to things like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and all those heavy metal bands of the late 70s and early 80s. And so that certainly had an influence on me. But as an individual, I didn't want to be just like my brothers. I wanted to be my own person. So my form of rebellion was to get into classical music. Wow. And being an Alberta boy yourself, I'm sure you have listened to CKUA at some point in your life, and that was certainly that informed my musical journey. And it's surprising the places that I've found music in my life. I mean, I shouldn't say everyone of an age probably was influenced to some extent by Columbia House. Columbia House Records was a mail order service that would sell vinyl records and then cassettes and then CDs. And they tried to foray into MP3 files for a while. And I don't believe that they're an active company anymore, but certainly I have, I've pared down my collection of music several times over the course of my life, but I think currently I have somewhere around 700 vinyl LPs and probably just as many CDs. And it's a lot of that was Columbia House. They were able to offer simple stuff. When I also talk about the journeys that we take, I mean, the one thing that is true no matter what genre or art that you're looking at is that the more you find out about that genre, the more you find out about that discipline, the more you find out you don't know. Yeah. And it takes you down all these little rabbit holes. So if I go back to that first explorations in country and Western music, and even the nursery rhymes that we used to sing in my neck of the woods in Alberta, they were very country and Western based, and but also based in the church. I mean, so a lot of gospel music was listened to. My dad was a big Blackwood Brothers Quartet fan. And I listened to the Happy Goodmans and the Kingsmen and the Gaithers. But at the same time, we're also listening to Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings and Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash. So there's that traditional base. And then once you start getting into the rock and roll, I mean, like I said, my brothers were listening to some hard rock and heavy metal when my oldest brother was 6 years older than me. So when he was 18, I was 12. And the kinds of music that I would have been listening to at that time that would have been verging onto things like glam rock. So I listened to Motley Crue and Poison and Rat and Anthrax and those kinds of heavy metal bands. But I still was listening to Bach and Beethoven, and I played in marching bands, so I loved John Philip Sousa. I've always had a big appreciation for low brass, so a lot of the Russian composers, Tchaikovsky and as Prokofiev, they really influenced what I listened to, and it's always been this circuitous route. So I was blessed to have a very good music instructor when I was in middle school and high school, a fellow by the name of Jerry Fryatt. And Jerry was a brass player himself. And me being a tuba player, we went on lots of musical journeys. At that time, we were playing not just popular selections, but we were heavily influenced by the Canadian brass. And then I joined the Sea Cadets because it was something cool to do with lots of people, and traveled all over the country playing in different bands through Sea Cadets. Would spend my summers learning and teaching music out in British Columbia. And again, that influence of brass bands. Ran into a fellow who was a course cadet instructor out there by the name of Joel Tomlenovich. Joel was a big circus march guy. I mean, I had at that point gotten into marches, but I never really considered the subgenre of circus marches. That was a whole nother rabbit hole to go down that just took me weird places. So now when I look at my collection of music, I don't just have the standard. I mean, I do have the standards of things like Canadian Gord Lightfoot.
Sure.
This would not be a deep dive listening thing, because it's a compilation that has a bunch of his hits on it. But if you're into Canadiana, that's going to be a great one to listen to. But I still also have, vintage Oak Ridge Boys. 1972, I think this is. Yeah, 1972. And then I've also got world music like pan flutes from South America and Latin jazz and Brazilian music. So it's pretty all over the place. Wow. And so for me to narrow it down to what are the 100 things anybody should listen to, well, I'm a big believer in find what makes you happy in music and follow it. It's going to take you places you never thought you'd go. That certainly doesn't mean you want to not take those deep dives into things that are concepts. So if I think about the Boomtown Rats, this album, although a lot of people only associate it, the fine art of surfacing, is although people only seem to focus in on the one big hit on it, which is I Don't Like Mondays, if you listen to all of the pieces on both sides, it tells a story as well. Rush was famous for that. Neil Peart would write concept albums where one side was just one song. 2112 was a concept album, and that was and still is an anchoring point of progressive rock. Prog rockers like Phish and the Grateful Dead and Rush, they would take a concept and expound on it over the course of two sides of an LP. And I think that there are two big things that I think are the way we consume today have changed from when we consumed primarily vinyl. Vinyl was limited by how much information you could put onto a pressing. Just like when CDs first came out, the format for CDs was, I think it's the legend has it that it was determined by Beethoven's Fifth Symphony could fit onto a CD, and that's how they came up with the format that they had. But the amount of information that you can fit on a CD today is 100 times that. And there's a few things that's done. We now consume in smaller chunks. So instead of going out and buying an album, whether it be one by a single artist, one that comes to mind recently who recently passed is John Prine. Rather than buying this piece of vinyl and breaking it down into an easy listening of a half an hour to an hour, where you can explore whatever information can be put into that concept. Now we go into Spotify or Apple Music or whatever it is that you're consuming, and you're listening to either anthologies of an artist that are spanning the course of a career, or you're listening to single bites, little tiny moments of their career. So when I talk about doing a deep listen, you can do it through electronic means, but it's a more self-directed learning than what we used to consume in the 70s and 80s and 90s, when you were limited by the information that was able to be put onto a particular physical piece of information. I have a very easy definition of music, that there are only two kinds of music: the kind you like and the kind you don't. And what you like and what I like can be totally different, and that's totally okay, because we're totally different people. We're different individuals with different influences who've gone down different rabbit holes in our lives to find that information. So just like I would be very surprised if you had listened to this piece of vinyl, Word 2. This is from the 80s. Let's see, what year is this? 1988, Zumba Productions, an anthology of rap music from the early 80s. So Kool Moe Dee, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, now known as Will Smith, Miss Melody, the Skinny Boys, the Wee Papa Girl rappers. Well, there was a period in my life where I was very interested in rap music and how it chronicled the lives of the people who were creating it. And so that rabbit hole is one I went down, and I listened to Ice-T and Public Enemy and NWA, and while they may not have been something that I had direct knowledge of, the empathy and compassion that we as individuals have when we connect with something like that drew me down that hole. There are lots of things that are standbys. That I talked about how it's weird where some of the stuff has come from. Mozart. Mozart has been everywhere, been used in everything from film scores to everything. Well, you might notice that on this one, this is a Funkin' Wagnalls compilation. Funkin' Wagnalls was known for creating condensed books. They worked with Reader's Digest. In this particular case, this series of 22 albums that were available were done in the 80s in conjunction with Superwares Canada. Superwares Canada is also known as Safeway. So you would buy so much in groceries, and that would entitle you to either a free or discounted copy of classical music. Another one that you don't think of their influence, but have influenced millions of people across North America. This one is marches, love marches, but Time Life. The Time, what is now the Time Warner Company, the Time Life Company, was Life magazine. And again, condensed books and prints and posters of art and classical and folk music of the day. So you get it where you can find it. The public library was a huge source of exploration for me. When I was doing my diploma in music, I often would just sit in the library with, I was in a dorm room. I didn't have my stereo. I didn't have great infrastructure to be able to listen to music well, but I went to the library, and there was a Technics SL 1200 turntable with a set of Audio-Technica headphones, which, as an individual, those were pretty expensive even back then. So to sit down and just put on headphones and block out the world to listen intently, and that's the whole part of deep listening, is you're listening with intent. You're not listening passively, just having it wash over you while you do something else. You're trying to find a connect. You are connected to the music, and you're intentionally trying to explore it. You can listen to the music in its composite layers. So if you're talking about singer-songwriter music, whether it's country music or folk music or rock and roll, you can listen to it for its lyrical content.
Yeah.
And then you can listen to it for its harmonic structure. You can listen to it for the melodic structure and the solo improvisation series. Jazz was great for that, because as the more I got into jazz, the more I wanted to find out how it was structured, and I would spend hours with Miles Davis Kind of Blue trying to pick out each note of each solo, so I could figure out why is it that my dad thinks that this is just a pile of notes thrown at a wall hoping something will stick, and I can hear something different than that.
Yeah.
What is it about it that makes it so? That helped me to listen intently to things like the Oak Ridge Boys from 1972, and they're covering a Carl Perkins tune called "Daddy Sang Bass," and it put them on the map as artists in the popular culture, because before that they were primarily a gospel band. After that, they were a gospel band in the mainstream, touring with Johnny Cash and the Carter family. So how to listen with the intention of, okay, well, what was the song? What was the hook? What were their harmonies like? Yeah. Why is their version the popular one and not the guy who wrote it? So having some intention is what helps to direct some of those deep dives. And then some of it is also trying to find or rediscover the meaning of the music from when you first discovered the music. I remember very distinctly listening to recordings of the Chicago Symphony or the Boston Pops Orchestra or whatever orchestra you can think of doing Mozart or Beethoven, and then sitting down in the audience at my first orchestral concert.
Yeah.
And figuring out that was a totally different experience. Yeah. And how that so you can listen to tons of recordings and listening to them on good headphones or with good speakers, it never seems to recreate that intimate connection between the artist and the listener that happens in a live space, whether it's in a small club somewhere and it's one person with a guitar and you connect with the lyric, or whether you're going to Mozart on the Mountain or Beethoven in the Badlands and listening to a full orchestra bring that music from hundreds of years ago to life. Yeah. It's that intimate connection that you're trying to rediscover in listening to it. And sometimes it's, going to these performances can be overwhelming. You miss a lot of the nuance of the performance. So having the recording to go back to make that memory connection to, oh, that was that moment in the piece when the lights turned blue and all of a sudden, something changed in the feel of the room, whatever it was. That recording can help you take you and transport you where you were, and sometimes it can transport you to someplace you've never been. So I have a fairly decent listening system at home where I have some nice speakers set up in a space that surrounds me. Yeah. And then I have some not super high fidelity, but some reasonably accurate reproduction. I'm wearing a set of in-ears right now, some Shure in-ears that I used to listen to some wave files with them because they have good sound rejection from outside noise sources, and they do reproduce relatively accurately what's going on in the music. But if you can find whatever you can find, if you can find a space to block out the rest of the world and just be somewhere else because of the music. And you know what? It doesn't even have to be music. I beat poetry I've listened to, comedic albums. I've got some old Andy Griffith vinyl and some old The Goons, which was a British comedy troupe, including Peter Sellers. And listening to that can transport you. Art is art. So whether it's comedy, visual art, performing arts, I've quite often said that I would prefer to see an opera rather than to listen to an opera, because the combination of the visual and the acting and the choreography is much more impactful than just listening to the voice. That's not to say that Placido Domingo and Enrico Caruso didn't have powerful voices that could touch you, but taking it out of context didn't seem to be as an intentional listen as going to see the performance. And Broadway musicals are the same thing. I mean, if you go and see Rent, if you go and see Shrek the Musical, whatever musical you choose, it's that intention that really counts. And I think the same thing goes when you're starting to pass along your listening to the next generation. Obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious or not. I think a lot of our kids are going to listen to what they are familiar with. So if they're sitting down in front of the TV and they're watching VeggieTales or Disney movies or Pixar or whatever they're watching, they're picking up on those songs. I mean, my daughters, Evelyn and Amelia, are 3 and 6, and certainly that's what they do. But we also have music that is not listened to intentionally, at least by me, because it's we listen to a lot of kids bop it's called, and it's if you remember Mini Pops. Same concept. It's a more modern version of it, and they have YouTube videos and they have interactive stuff online. But it's basically taking popular songs of the day, cleaning them up for younger ears, and but continuing to incite that love of that style, whether it be R&B or rap or singer. Like there's Ed Sheeran covers, there's Adele covers. I found that to be really an interesting journey, because at least I don't remember being into these washed versions of popular music. I remember listening to Tiny Tim and Rick Dees and Goofy Greats and Dumb Ditties, which were they certainly were a cleaner, different, more comedic, usually, style. But some of those songs still stick me. I mean, Roger Miller's soundtrack to the Disney movie Robin Hood was amazing, and Roger Miller was one of the best songwriters of his generation. But my kids like to sing Frozen soundtrack. They like to dance to Mulan, and some of them are connections with stuff that my wife and I have grown up with, but some of them are just their own. I think that what we're trying to do is help them find the intention in the song. They're listening not just to the lyric and recreating the lyric, but also Amelia especially is now starting to go, oh, well, that's what this means when she sings about let it go. It's not just about the words and the literal meaning, but finding the metaphor and finding, so as parents, you want to make sure that you're exposing them to a broad range and a broad style. I know Amelia, when bath time rolls around, afterwards we have to brush the girls' hair because they have long hair, and we'll sit down and we'll sometimes put on some adult music, not necessarily adult in the sense that it's off-color lyrically, but more just in the sense that it's something that they wouldn't necessarily be exposed to any other way. And I think that's important. I think that it's important for them to go down their own musical journeys by finding the intention in the music. Now, especially now that they're discovering the non-literal portion of it, of the metaphor and the stories within the stories. It's also helped them a lot to be able to read and to be able to explore their books. They're finding there was a piano player who lived up here not very long ago, and he comes back fairly frequently. His name is Dennis Nassar. Dennis was is from South America, and he learned English not necessarily by sitting down with books and an instructor to learn English, but in learning the melodic structure and the rhythms of the language. You know, the fact that when we ask a question, our voice raises at the end. Is that a question? Yeah, well, that's how and those are the kinds of things that songs can do. And they can be fun, and they can be transporting. And in these times right now, when we don't have a lot of leeway of where we can travel and where we can explore, music is a world that you can explore no matter where you're at. So teaching your kids how to listen with intention, it's a long road. Don't get me wrong. The attention span isn't always there. But just starting them down that road, and you know, we went for a long walk today, me and the girls, and they were singing on the walk, and that gives me great hope that they're going to have the same joy of music and the same joy of exploration that I've been able to enjoy.